President. So the today's presentation is our June presentation for our Economic Workforce Development Series at Camden Rotary. And today we will be, oh, I should mention that we have a lot of guests here, and I would encourage guests to introduce themselves in the general chat section, and feel free to leave an email if you'd like to be contacted for further Economic Workforce Development Series productions. Also, all question and answers today will be run through the chat, the general chat session. So as our speaker is presenting, if you have thoughts or questions, please enter those in the chat, and we have 2 Rotary members who will moderate those questions at the end of the presentation. So thank you. So it is my pleasure to introduce Marla O'Byrne, who is the Executive Director of the Island Housing Trust of Mount Desert Island. And this housing trust promotes viable year-round communities by establishing partnerships that create workforce, rental, and home ownership opportunities in MDIs for communities. Marla is a founding board member of the Island Housing Trust. She has been active in community engagement projects and strategies through her work with nonprofits in Maine over the past 30 years. She has served as the president and CEO of Friends of Acadia, senior vice president at Maine Farmland Trust, and the MDI Tomorrow Steering Committee. Please join me in welcoming Marla O'Byrne.
Thank you, everybody. I am going to just take a second here to share my screen. Of course, we tried this out. Where'd it go? Okay, so there we go. As John said, I am the Executive Director of Island Housing Trust. And in the early 2000s, Mount Desert Island went through a community visioning session called MDI Tomorrow. And out of that session came a workforce housing group that understood that one of the challenges we were facing was an increasing cost of housing on the island and increasing competition for the inventory that we had. And Island Housing Trust began. So just to step back a minute, I thought I'd give you just a brief introduction of what we've been doing since 2003, what we've accomplished, the tools we've used, and recognize that every community is unique. So what we've done may or may not spark ideas for your area, but I'm hoping that it will at least be interesting, if not helpful. So as you heard, our mission is to promote viable year-round island communities, and we do that through permanent workforce housing on MDI. Our focus is the communities and the economic base, the customers, the people who volunteer and provide essential services. And last year, we all understood even more how important having a diverse economic range of people working on the island year-round during a pandemic was very important to the resilience of our communities. Since I have to move here, some people. Okay, since 2003, IHT has created 47 homeownership opportunities. And by that, we mean we hold covenants on 36 homes on the island. And we have overseen the successful resale of 11 of those houses. And that has served 140 individuals who are the workers on the island, volunteers, the kids in the schools, and our shoppers. And we have done this a variety of ways. Our first project was as a developer of 9 energy efficient homes on land that was donated by the town of Mount Desert residents. On 10 acres, we've completed 2 phases of a 3-phase development there with 9 houses and an additional 9 houses that we have banked for the future. while we take advantage of other opportunities we would otherwise lose. We're a small staff of 3 people, so we need to be strategic in the projects we take on. One of the other components that we developed early on was working with partners. So we worked with a landowner who had 4 acres and wanted to build 4 houses on 1 acre lots on her land. She worked with a modular company. She did most of this development on her own with some assistance from Island Housing Trust, but our role for her was to hold the covenants long term. So these houses would remain year round and affordable to the workforce she was targeting. We've worked with the towns. We get some funding from the towns. We've received land donations from Mount Desert. We have worked with Maine Coast Heritage Trust on 2 projects and have 2 or 3 others that are in the exploration phase. One of our current projects is creating a neighborhood at the head of the island called Jones Marsh. And it is 30 acres of a 60-acre parcel. MCHT had wanted to conserve the wetlands of Jones Marsh, as it was an important parcel of land in a critical watershed on the island. They didn't need the 30 acres that were upland, and so decided, to work with us that it was more appropriate for year-round housing. And that is one of our current and projects that we're working on in partnership. And we've just recently worked with another housing organization in Northeast Harbor. Their focus is strictly within the town of Mount Desert. And it's a 2-fold mission of year-round housing, but also economic development. And we had a homeowner approach us about this house on the lower right. They wanted to sell the house, but they wanted it to remain in year-round occupancy, and to retain the year-round character of their neighborhood. So we found a partner to help us fund the purchase of the house and then sell it for $135,000 less. So it was affordable to a median income household on the island. And we received donation of a house, and we were fortunate. The donor had bought a parcel of land with this small little efficient house on it and didn't need the house, but hated to see it torn down. So they donated the house, and they also donated the move. And we negotiated the donation of another parcel from the town of Mount Desert to move that house onto. So it now has a little family of 3. We responded to the opportunity to purchase this red house in Northeast Harbor. And I should say that Northeast Harbor is one of our oldest summer enclaves. And we are seeing pressures from people who are buying for guest houses, people who just can't afford to live in Northeast Harbor any longer because market prices have shot up so much. So when this house came on the market, we were able to buy it. We did some renovations because nothing had been upgraded since the 1950s, so it needed some electrical work. We had an architect donate his services to help us renovate the interior, and we're able to resell it to a woman who was thinking that she was going to have to move to Southern Maine because to be near family, because she couldn't find a place to rent on the island. Never dreamed of buying until someone told her about our program in the house, and she is a year-round worker in the village and a paramedic, so she would have been quite a loss to the community, and we were able to keep her on the island. And around 2010, we recognized, and in 2010 this was true, there were some properties that would come on the market that would be nearly affordable to a working family. But often the problem was coming up with cash for a down payment that would make their mortgage payments attainable, achievable. So we developed the homeownership assistance program, and through that, we assess the house and make sure that it meets our criteria for long-term viability. It has what it needs to be, a safe habitation for the buyer. And then we will assist with the down payment. We don't make an entire down payment. And since 2011, when we raised enough money to participate in this first project you're looking at, we have contributed more than $430,000 to help families purchase 16 homes in all 4 towns on the island. And we're trying to grow that program because it's just so efficient. It takes much less staff time and energy and cost than development. It uses our existing housing stock, and it keeps our year-round neighborhoods. It helps maintain our year-round neighborhoods as with lights on all winter long. So those are some of the ways in which we have been building up our stock of houses. And I have said, you know, we keep these houses affordable through covenants. So we have a covenant document that is registered with the deed. It gives Island Housing Trust right of first refusal. When the house comes up for sale, it allows us 60 days to decide if we are going to purchase that house or not. And that will give us that safety net if the house needs critical repairs, if for whatever reason something has skewed it out of the price range and we can make adjustments, or whatever other reason. We did buy one house back. We exercised our right of first refusal, and we were making covenant amendments within a neighborhood. And to do that, we wanted just to have it all settled before a new homeowner came in and had to try and adjust, one, to the fact of covenants in the first place, and then to amendments. So we also retain a mortgage deed, a secondary subordinated mortgage deed, and that keeps us in the chain of title for refinancing. For instance, anybody wants to refinance, they need to have IHT's approval. And we provide the bank with a subordinated mortgage agreement for the new mortgage, but we also provide what the resale value of that house would be at that moment in time. And in the covenants, we have a form that we call the maximum resale formula that ties the resale of the house to the change in the state's median income. That's the metric we use. So if the median income goes up, that change is factored into the resale cost of the house to increase the cost of the house. We also include qualified improvements on the house. And in working with our homeowners that way, we have seen that we've been able to always find buyers that can afford the houses that are within our eligible criteria for income. So we have found, as we've tried, you know, we continue to try to grow. 36 houses is pretty good, but we could certainly use a lot more. We have a target of, I would say, at least 200 houses. So what we are constantly doing, it's a complicated business, and I am just giving you the high level snapshot of what we do. So how do we convey that to our communities? You know, the messaging is to our donors to help, to our towns to understand how they can participate, and to our year-round communities, so people who need housing know that we exist and they can come and see if we have anything available. And they can be supportive as well at town meetings when we're asking for financial support from the town. And in our messaging, we've kind of honed it down. I mean, obviously it's different everywhere, but one of the things we know, several of the things we know we need to convey is, what is the problem? And why does it matter? What does it mean to our communities? What do our stakeholders think about it? Think about the problem, think about what we do, and why should anyone care? And that last one really reflects on our donor base, who has a long history on the island. Many of our donors have been coming up for generations, or at least since they were born. They feel connected to the island, but they may not be too concerned or understand the immediacy of reducing school enrollments, for instance. So our messaging, we try to understand what our different audiences' ties are to the community, to help them understand how this affects a shortage of affordable year-round housing affects them. You know what? I haven't been advancing. I am sorry. So under the what's the problem, we did a housing assessment in 2018, and we had 5 partners, different organizations, and the towns on the island participate in funding this. And we found out a lot. It was, over 120 pages long, but we pulled out some of the key things, and I'm just sharing a few of them with you. And they've been key to how we've shaped some of our messaging. So, and gave shape to the problem for us. So in 2017, 84% of the houses that were sold on the island would not have been attainable or affordable to median income households. So that means 16% might have been available to those year-round households. From 2000 to 2016, the home values went up 120%, while the median income only increased by 44%. So we saw a widening of the gap between what's affordable to purchase and what houses are actually selling for. Typical income on MDI, and this was a couple of years ago, 2018, was in the $200,000 to $250,000 range, and that obviously did not meet the $350,000 median house price, which was in 2017 $350,000. And then we looked at, of the new housing that's being built, how much of it was being built for year-round families. But we saw 60% was for seasonal, recreational, or occasional owners, which was a huge increase, 227% over a 10-year period of 2000 to 2010. And I threw this one in. It's a graphic that I used to remind me that statistics are good, numbers are good, they help people understand, but often it's the presentation that makes a difference. So this is from one of our publications showing the decrease in our student base. So it was 25% in 2017, between 2013, 2017, I believe, compared to 2.5% throughout the state of Maine. So last year was an unusual year, of course, which is my understatement. And we wanted to, we couldn't redo the housing study again, but we did find resources. Maine listings helped us understand what we were seeing in the real estate market. So in Hancock County, Maine listings has calculated that housing sales were up 51% in a 3-month period of December to February of 2021 over that same time period of February 2020, which is a huge leap. Median sales prices during that same 3-month period in 2021 over 2020 increased 41%. But Maine's median income decreased 1% from 2020 to 2021. So we see that gap again widening. And we know this anecdotally. It's helpful to be able to give it a shape and a scale for people we talk with. So then the question of why does it matter? That will differ for various people. Some people are concerned about raising their children in a safe place and in a neighborhood where there are other children. Some people are concerned about living in a neighborhood that's dark most of the year. and they'd rather have their neighbors for a sense of security, for friendship, for support. And then some people, you'll see this is the paramedic. Margaret purchased the house from us, the red house in Northeast Harbor, and she works in the hardware store and serves as a paramedic. She is a valued person in the community. And people want to know that there are paramedics there, and they want to know that their hardware store can stay open. All sorts of reasons. And so we try to understand, what does it mean to stakeholders? And we try to convey those stories. Over the past couple of years, we've been doing video interviews. We have short videos from homeowners about what it has meant to them to be able to buy. We have a short video about the communities and how the communities benefit from having a strong and vibrant year-round population. And then also a short video from the movers and shakers, as we call it, some of the key resources, Acadia National Park, the hospital, Jackson Laboratory, and police chief from Mount Desert and Bar Harbor, all to help kind of frame that picture of what it means to different strata of our society, different elements of our communities. So one of the quotes, and we pulled from our videos quotes, but one of the quotes from Jim Willis, who's the police chief I told you about, said, let's say we've got a major incident going on and we want to call some more people in. We have to stop and think about who could get here in a reasonable amount of time. For some people to get here from Ellsworth and all the traffic, that's more than an hour's drive. If it were someone living here in town, I could have them here in 5 or 10 minutes. I think that's about as clear and compelling as you could get for anyone who lives on the island or stays here. And why should I care? So we use this picture. It's rather dramatic profile picture of 2 firefighters from the town of Mount Desert with the subtitle, "Who are you going to call?" Because in the starkest reality, that is a concern. This profile picture, we have some more friendly ones that are a little less dramatic, but this one has a story behind it. And a professional photographer who lives in Solmesville here, his daughter was out snowmobiling with her best friend and her friend's father in the winter on Long Pond, and they went through the ice. And there are no houses on most of the pond. And where they went into the ice, they were able to get out, but they were stranded on the shore, and they were calling for help. It was late. It was probably 9 or 10 at night. Somebody drove by and heard them calling and called the fire department and the police department and got help out there, and they were taken off to the hospital and treated for minor hypothermia, and everybody was fine. But the photographer did, in thanks, he did a portfolio of profile photos of first responders, and it was in Down East Magazine a couple of years ago. But it so dramatically tells the story about what it means to have a year-round community, to live here and to be there when you need them. So what else can be done? One of our hallmarks, I feel, has been to be adaptable to opportunities. It means a lot of work in assessing whether or not a project will work, but it has also meant that we have been able to grow our programs with creativity that we may not have come up with unless we paid attention to the donor or the idea that came along. And one of the things we're finding now is we really need to understand our town zoning ordinances. And there may be changes that could help. It may be additions or it may be revisions. It's understanding the implications on year-round housing. For instance, the town of Southwest Harbor added in a zoning ordinance that allowed accessory dwelling units. It had certain criteria, sideboards, but what they didn't do was make it explicit that they wanted those ADUs to be dedicated to year-round housing. So many of those units are not fulfilling that wish for them. So that's something we have been talking about with the members of the planning board. Part of our housing assessment was to look at what other communities are doing. We helped them identify various destination communities with natural resource destination or national park destinations that are feeling similar pressures to Mount Desert Island and the coast of Maine, and looked at what they were doing to see what we could learn and see if any of their approaches would be replicable where we are. And then the potential partners, land trusts, other nonprofits, developers. That's something I'd like to work more on, is with contractors. We have a landlord who is a building contractor, and he came to us with an idea that he wanted to buy a piece of land, which he ultimately didn't. But his plan was to work with small, efficient houses and sell them. It would be his development, but he asked IHT to hold the covenants for those houses. It would have been a wonderful thing to do, but history kind of intervened in that one. But thinking about the different ways that we can expand our capacity to do the work we're trying to do with other organizations and people. Supportive lending institutions. We have been fortunate to have local banks who have been willing to work with financing mortgages with either their portfolio or other products they have for properties that have covenants. IHT is moving forward in a new model that we're using land leases now, retaining ownership of the underlying land and selling the improvements to the home buyers. We ran into a challenge with that model. Three of our regular financing lending institutions said, no, we're not going to work with a land lease. We don't really understand it. We don't really have the product for it. So we've been sitting down with them to talk about how it could be done. And we've turned around two of the banks who are now willing to work with us on land leases. It's taken 6 months, but had we been more aware of that, we could have done it ahead of a couple of our purchases or sales we were trying to do. And another problem we ran into was appraisers. It's been a wild and crazy real estate market over the past year, and appraisers were not interested in taking on a project of appraising a land. They didn't have a lot of comps to work with. It was a model that was more challenging than they needed to bother with, frankly, because they can pick and choose the projects they're working on. They've easily been turning down projects every day. So we are working now with 2 or 3 appraisers who are interested in working with us on land leases because they also believe in the mission of the organization. So it has been a lesson in the first no doesn't have to be the final answer, that we talk to either our lending institutions or our appraisers to help them understand the ultimate goal for what we're doing and build their support as we explain it to them. And let's see. Yeah, and this is a snapshot of some of our homeowners, and right in the middle, what looks like the devil is actually a contestant in the bed races we have in November, the first Saturday in November, which is the pajama sale day. So you come in your pajamas and there's a race of beds down Main Street in Bar Harbor. And that's it for me. Now I have to find out. Okay. All right.
Okay, Marla, thank you very much. Richard
Yes.
Anderson here. And the first question we have is from Jim Bowditch. And it says, says that it seems as though one of the hallmarks of IHT is the flexibility in your report, in your approach. Please comment. What are some of your flexibilities? What are some of the different ways that have worked the best and give you the best results?
Well, I think the homeownership assistance program was one of the best programs that we took on. And that came from a former board member who wanted to sell her house. And she said, I have a buyer, but she doesn't have quite enough money for the down payment. And from that, we looked at the potential for that and created the homeownership assistance program. Currently, after the partnership with the other nonprofit in Northeast Harbor, we are getting calls from people who want to sell their house to a year-round family, and they can't sell it at the price that we consider eligible right now. Using the current median income, it's right around $300,000. And some of these homes are, maybe only $60,000 more than that, but some might be $160,000 more than that. And so we've told them that the family that sold the house to this partnership sold it at the price at which they purchased it 5 years ago, plus minor improvements. And that helped us then bring the price down. We were able to contribute towards that house enough to sell it at, we purchased it at $410,000 and sold it at $275,000. So those are some of the ways we look at, what is the financial investment? What is the potential to do more of these types of projects? What is the benefit beyond just that house? Is it part of a neighborhood? Those considerations.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Marla. This is Matt Brown here. The next question is from Joan Fopp, and she says, can you elaborate on the process you use to conduct your housing assessments?
Oh, we hired a consultant. And, it sounds pretty easy, but we sat down with that consultant and we explained what we needed to know, because we knew what we wanted to be able about the scale of the problem on MDI. So working with that consulting team, we interviewed 3 consultants, and it was pretty clear there was one that had been working with towns on various surveys and assessments. So that's how we did that one.
Thank you.
Okay, now this another from Clark Doran. I'd like to hear more about how HIT is funded.
Yes. So recently we've begun to ask the towns for assistance, and we target that for our homeownership assistance program. It's clear for them that everyone benefits from that. And right now we have the 4 towns contributing a total of just under $20,000. So that's not a lot of what we do. It's mainly donors and members. We are currently in the quiet phase of a capital campaign for 3 different goals. Hope is one of them. Jones Marsh development that I talked about with Maine Coast Heritage Trust is one of them. And then we're starting a new opportunities fund. And since September of last year, we've raised $2.2 million towards a goal of 3.5. So a lot of it is donations. Majority of it is donations.
Great, thank you. This one's from Bob Baldwin. Marla, what do you consider to be the key ingredients to establish a similar trust here in our community?
I think having a core of people who represent your community well is good. I think understanding the problem, a housing study is how we started in 2004. It helped give us the facts we needed. If you have talent on your group to do that in-house, it's doable. It's actually culling a lot of information from public resources, but it's knowing the scale of the problem, knowing what it is you want to accomplish. For Island Housing Trust, it's been homeownership was what we've done. We need to be into rentals, but we don't have the staff at this moment. So we are also working with our housing authority to look at, is there a way IHT can build rental units and contract the housing authority to be the property manager for us. I'll just mention there are a couple of other organizations. The solutions will look different for North Haven. They started with senior housing so that they could have a place for their senior residents to live, to stay on the island when they were no longer willing or able to live alone in their homes. Kennebunkport Heritage Housing Trust is working on a project that's a mix of duplexes and single family homes that are home ownership. And Deer Isle has the Island Workforce Housing Organization that is working on 20, I believe, rentals in duplexes, 10 duplexes for rentals. So it all depends on what your community housing needs are. Are they rentals for younger people who to build equity? Is it home ownership for families who could have bought a house here 15 years ago, but the prices have just exploded? It's understanding what your community needs are as well, I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and from Brad Seelfan, the 84% of the, I think you said homes unattainable to or to the medium income is hard for me to wrap my head around, says Brad. And do you have actual numbers of housing supply shortages or calculations of the, those under the curve?
Yeah, we don't really. And that 84% was not houses that are unattainable, but the sales. So what was being sold in that year of those sales, 84%, nobody could have afforded who lived here year round and earned a median income. But of the sales we're seeing, we only hear anecdotally that the house is being purchased for Airbnb, for instance, or for seasonal housing for a new hotel. We don't know those numbers. They're not recorded.
Back to you, President Chris.
Okay, no, Brad, see, we have another one from
Sorry,
Brenda.
sorry.
Yeah, Maria, do you have any realtors on MDI who are sensitive to your mission?
We do. We have quite a few. And when we sell a house, we have an applicant queue that has pre-qualified to meet our eligibility. And we offer it to them first. If no one purchases from that queue, we then advertise it. And among the advertising, we have 44 realtors we send the information out to. We have one realtor on our board, one realtor who is on our advisory partners council. And there are others who contact us when they see a house come up that seems like it might be within range.
This question comes from Brad Seelfan again. Is the bridge funding program completely funded by donation? Do you recoup?
Oh, good question. Yes, the HOPE program is completely funded by, well, we use restricted funds. We try to raise money for that program. If there is a project that that comes up that we need to do, if we have sufficient reserved funds earned from unrestricted from other years, we will apply that towards the program. But we don't recoup the funding. It is, however, it runs with the house. So when the house comes up for resale, we look at what did they buy the house for? $200,000. How much did we put into it? $25,000. So then that base price for sale of that house is $175,000, if that makes sense.
Okay, from John Goss. Great program, Marla, first of all. For the buyers, what range of the percent of median income are you working with?
Yeah, well, that's a nice question, and it differs. We have some houses that the purchasing household could earn up to 120% of median income. We have some houses that are up to 160% of median income. And then the landowner that built the 4 houses on 4 acres wanted a 200% of median income because she was targeting employees working for one of our scientific laboratories at which her husband had been a scientist for many, many years. So we hold the covenants on those. Each of them, we need to look at the documents to see what were the terms of the eligibility for that project. We just recently looked at what did our buyers actually, what was the percentage of median income for those buyers who actually bought the houses. And we saw that our range of buyers' median income, their range was 70% to 140, with the preponderance being, you know, at 110 or less percent of median.
Thank you. This is from Susan. Is there an ideal size critical mass for a housing trust? Should it be larger than one town, ideally?
Well, because we're an island, we believed it needed to be all 4 towns. So I think it depends. That's difficult for me to try and figure out depending on where you are. I think you look at the community that is most impacted and understand what around it, what the benefits would be for other towns surrounding you. Yeah, we were easily defined by geography, frankly.
Okay, and from Dave Jackson, is the Island Institute a potential partner?
Well, 2 years ago, or maybe 3, but 2 years ago, Island Institute convened a workshop for housing organizations to help network, but also to help build skills. And it was interesting. Many of us had been doing nonprofit work for many years. So what we wanted to do was network. What are you doing? How are you doing it? Are there ways that we could work together and increase? My feeling has been for years that we really need to have a coastal housing initiative, really, because this is an issue from one end of the state to the other along the coast. Pandemic has shown us it moving inland too, but the Island Institute was happy to help build the capacity strengths of the organizations, but at that time didn't feel that year-round housing was necessarily their role for partnership, with the exception that you know, non-bridged islands were important for them to try and support those organizations in some way.
Thank you. This question, may be the final one, comes from Reuben Brown, who says, excellent experience and insights. Are the contributions tax deductible?
Yes, we're a 501c3.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris, do you want to take it over then?
I will. Thank Marla. I wanted to thank you very much for your presentation. It's exciting to hear what our neighboring communities are doing down east, and it gives us hope that we can hopefully follow your footsteps and create a vibrant affordable housing community in our areas as well. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we wish you guys the very best down there.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Chris.
Done.
Should just mention that Marla has told us that she will stay on at 1 o'clock for an open mic question and answer session from those who aren't comfortable with the chat feature.
Perfect. So we'll finish a little bit of official business here and then see you on the top of the hour. But with that, I will now turn it over to Matt Brown, who's our Sergeant at Arms. Go ahead to open it up to further questions for Marla. And at this point, rather than call on you, I mean, I can look around for hands, but if somebody does have a follow-up question for Marla, why don't we just go ahead and chime in, and we'll see how that works.
Marla, Rich Anderson here. Maybe my question has been answered, but I was concentrating on other questions. What's your approach as opposed to a few of the other trust approaches that are going on in the state right now? How do you contrast them? What are the advantages of your approach versus some of the other approaches? As we think about doing something here, what's the best model to follow? Or a combination of?
Yeah, I think that each of the organizations that I mentioned are doing what they've identified as the greatest need for their community. Deer Isle, we met with them as they were forming their organization. They were actually picking up from an organization that had tried 13 years before and just had kind of gone defunct. And so they were picking this up again. And what they realized was that young people on Deer Isle needed rentals. So that's what they focused on. And they've worked with their land trust to find a piece of land that has some conservation value and some housing area for them. And they're working with a local architect who's helped them design the duplexes. So for them, that was the solution they needed. And for Kennebunkport Heritage Housing Trust, they have an organization of all volunteer board members that are taking on a development of 8 to 10 units, I believe, single family houses and duplexes on land that has some donation component to it, but the rest has been fundraising, and it's been very closely tied with the town because one of their board members is a former town manager, I think, I'm not sure, but has long history with the town. So that worked for their organization and their community. I think it's really identifying where you're seeing the most pressure and what your community needs.
Thank you.
Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, you probably answered this question or mentioned how this is unfolded when it needs to be unfolded. When one of the families that has one of the homes at a discounted rate needs to make a change either because of a change in family situation or new job opportunity, and you unwind the house, how does that transition occur? Does it transfer to a new family at the lower price, or are the people that purchased the house eligible for the increased valuation? How do you unwind the purchase?
So when a family, when a household decides that they're going to sell their house for whatever reason, they notify Island Housing Trust. And we work out what the maximum resale value of that house is and let them know. We either exercise our right of first refusal or we don't, and typically we don't.
So it's in the covenants, is it, or something?
It is. It's recorded with the deed. So our maximum resale value looks at how much they paid for the house. And if we contributed anything, that gets deducted out, but if, let's say we didn't, they just bought the house with covenants, and we look at what they purchased it for. We look at the change in the median income, and let's assume it went up 10%. Then we add that 10% of the purchase price as an increase in value of the house. If they added improvements that we've qualified, for instance, it's not a swimming pool, but it's probably solar panels on the roof. That adds to the efficiency of the house. So we'll include those solar panels in the resale cost of the house as well to increase its value. And then we look at what's our cap. We look at the median income for the state. What's the eligibility factor? Let's say it's 130% of median. So we multiply that median income times 130% times 2.5, which is kind of like a real estate factor of you can afford 2.5 times your income in a house price. And that sets what our cap is. The house sale price can't go above that cap. And that's how we help determine what's the maximum resale. They can sell less than that. And we had one family do that just recently. They took, I think, $15,000 off the house because they wanted to sell it They were moving somewhere that had housing provided. They wanted to give back to the next person, and they were struggling to get financing. So they brought it down to where he could afford it.
I think that's
That
been very well
answer?
thought. I think that's been very well thought out. And if other people are considering, I think they could use that as a model for going forward.
Thanks very much for that answer. Bill Griffith and then Ruben.
This might have been answered earlier and I missed it, but what actually is the median income for Maine?
For Maine, it's $75,700.
And is the income on the island in that range, the jobs available?
We can look up the island, but those statistics kind of come and go. So the most granular I can get is the county. So Hancock County's median income is 71,700, something like that, but it's in the 71,000 range. Yeah, so it's not too different.
Ruben, go ahead, please.
Your practical experience is invaluable for us to learn. Having been in small business for 40 years, I'm very sensitive to operating cash flow for the business. What's your budget like, and where do you get your money, and how do you keep your cash flow coming?
Yeah, so nonprofits have an interesting relationship with cash flow. We raise money in one year and then we have to spend it in the next, but the year we're spending money, raising money, so we're well enough established. We have a strong reserve of cash. We've had very conservative leadership. I tend to be less conservative, so I'm watching that money kind of come and go. We recently made a $275,000 loan to an organization that was acquiring a house to put covenants on it. And when it sold 3 months later, we got that money back, but that was kind of new for us. And the board was a little nervous, but they did it. And so we get our money from donations. We are out asking people to support their community by helping us provide year-round housing. And as part of our campaign, we are planning to go public with this in July. And my goal is to increase our local membership, because I think it's an important statement that people see this work as valuable to them, and they're willing to support it at whatever level, $10, $20, $100. I just want to know that local people, I want it demonstrated that local people know about this and support it.
So are you raising money year round?
Yep, we are.
Okay.
Most of it comes end of the year, frankly, and that's when contributions are made. So.
Marla,
Thank you.
John
It's
Goss,
a,
and then
is
we
this-
can go to Bob.
Oh, okay.
Bob, you go ahead. I'll be next.
Oh, okay. Marla, is it a situation where you have one very wealthy donor giving a huge portion of the funds, or are you getting a number of smaller donations?
We have, I would say we have a strong base of very wealthy donors that are giving moderate amounts of money. We hadn't been putting out an annual report until last year. We got one published, and we have 3 pages of donors. And I had one donor call me up and say, I had no idea you were that well supported. I thought it was just a few of us, for a little bit of money. So that's another case of being able to convey who you are and how you're working financially. So with this campaign, in addition to raising money for projects, we are also, I believe, strengthening our ties with our major donors and building our credibility so they can see that larger donations are going to work and they're doing the work that they want to have supported.
Mhm. Excellent. Thank you.
Jonathan.
Marla, my question is a little bit about what if. You were a founding board member for this organization, and if you could, with hindsight, go back, other than enthusiasm for the mission, what 5 individual skill sets would you want on your steering committee to get?
Dowie. Well, let's see, we had a couple of developers. One was an individual contractor, one was a larger business contractor. That was helpful in understanding the business. I think a lawyer is tremendously helpful because a lot of this is legal documents, establishing strong parameters for the criteria, because the last thing you want is to have people feel that they are not being treated equally or fairly when it comes to their housing choices. And we want to be responsible and clear in how we proceed forward if there are sales or refinances or, God forbid, defaults on mortgages. So legal brain is always good, or two. Realtors, having realtors available to help advise on, these are the highest selling properties, but here's where you could begin to look, or where are there properties that are close to public services that might be able to extend. I think having some role for the towns, the planning boards might be useful. We didn't formally have town involvement, but we did do outreach. So yeah, I would say, and an accountant, always good. Accounting advice for donors, as you think about what's the impact for donors and how can they give and what does it mean if they donate land. So accountant, legal, developer, real estate, I'd say. Yeah.
About contractors, do you have any contractors, builders?
We do. Unfortunately, we haven't had much participation from him over the past year because it's been a wicked busy time for him, but yes.
Yes.
We do.
Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, Marla, obviously we're talking about year-round affordable housing, but it seems to me in the Mid-Coast, and I'm sure on MDI, one of the big problems is getting seasonal help and then finding housing for them. Have you crossed with them? Is it part of your, tell me about how that fits into what you guys do.
Yeah. So I would say one of the greatest challenges for me around seasonal housing is not allowing somebody to pit us against them, that it's us or them. It's really, we're a network, and we focus on year-round housing, but we understand that there's the need for the seasonal housing for our businesses as well. And we also understand that the traditional homeowner on MDI has rented out their house for a month or two in the summer and moved to camp. And that's something that we have not accommodated in our houses, but we have discussed. And I wouldn't be surprised over time if we were to find a way to try to make that possible. But we recently, well, before the pandemic, actually, we had a local hotelier, one of the two major hoteliers, come and talk to us. And he had been working for 3 years with the town of Bar Harbor to allow, to create a zoning ordinance that would allow the hotels to build dormitories, they were calling them, but summer employee housing on site, so that they could bring their employees in from the year-round communities where they had been buying up houses to put them. It wasn't efficient for them. He's part of this community. He doesn't like that part of his business. He wanted those houses to go back to year-round occupation. So he was talking with us about a partnership where once he can build those dormitories and free up those homes, can IHT work with him to make sure that they end up in year-round occupation? So that's one of the ways in which we've been able to hopefully work, but he took quite a hit last year, so it may be a year or two before we can do anything.
Joe Curl.
I wondered if you had any relationship with Misha or FMHA, and if so, what was it?
We have not. Misha has a program that I am looking at, and I'm trying to find the time to actually apply. It's a sustainable green housing program, I believe. Anyway, sustainable development program. So that would be our first time. But we do contact them for advice. We do use their first-time home buyers on our website. We know that buyer education is important because our home buyers, often this is the first time they've done it. They don't know. Some people could as easily afford a mortgage as they could rent on this island, but they don't know that. It seems like one of those unattainable things. So we try and provide that education through Misha.
Well, Marla, I think you might have exhausted all of our questions. I want to thank you for sticking around this afternoon after our official meeting. And again, thank you for all the work that you do down at MDI. It's been very informative for us. So thanks again.
Thank you for inviting me. And if your working group wants to talk with IHT, we're happy to do that.
Thank you.
I think you'll be hearing from us. Okay. And with that, I am going to officially end today's meeting. Thanks again for all of you who joined us.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.